Okay, this weekend, Saturday, 2:30, we are hosting the number 4 Texas A&M Aggies. Like we do every week, we're just going to kind of break down the opponent, what they do offensively, what they do defensively, some of the players to know for them as you watch this football game. And then we're going to talk about us, spots where I think we can win, spots where I think we're going to struggle. And then this week, I just was kind of getting a little bored and I was like, you know what? I want to kind of do a deep dive into this game. And I've got three stats to know going into this game that I'm going to share at the end of this preview. But let's start off and let's really preview and let's break down this game. So on the offensive side of the football, talking about Texas A&M. So just two players to know right off the gate: Le'Veon Moss and Ruben Owens. Those are their two running backs with 300 plus rushing yards this year. Owens 56 carries, 327 rushing yards. Le'Veon Moss 70 carries, 389 rushing yards. Six touchdowns as well. This was a guy who returned back to this team. I think a lot of people thought could go out in the draft, but he's somebody I anticipated to have a really big season. So far, he's kind of shared a lot of the workload with Owens, but both of those running backs are very dynamic and players that we're going to have to stop this weekend. And then two receivers that are immediate names to know: Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion, both transfers. So Mississippi State transfer Mario Craver, and then NC State transfer Casey Concepcion. Stats to know: 60 catches between the two players. They have just the two of them, 57% of the receptions amongst any player on their offense, running backs, receivers, tight ends. When you go down to receiver, I think they have like 80% of their wide receiver receptions. But these two guys are really it. Like there's three dudes that have more than 100 yards in this passing offense. One of them's Terry Bussey or Busset, but the other two, Mario Craver, Casey Concepcion. Craver's got 32 catches, 634 yards, and four touchdowns. Concepcion, 28 catches, 447 receiving yards, and five touchdowns. So they really dominate this offense. Between the two of them, 60 catches, over 1,000 yards, nine touchdowns. Like they're going to be the two guys that Kenai Walker, Julian Neal, Jaheim Singletary, those defensive backs are going to really have to keep their eyes on. And then lastly, on the offensive side, the offensive line. We talked about this with Tennessee, hadn't allowed a lot of sacks. Same situation with Texas A&M. Their offensive line's only allowed 7 sacks, and more impressively, four of those came against Auburn. So really, 3 sacks in their other remaining 5 games. And like Tennessee, they've played teams as well. Like they've gone 3 straight SEC games. They played Florida last week, Mississippi State, Auburn, which was that game they gave up 4 sacks, and then they also played Notre Dame at Notre Dame. So for those other 3 games, and then Utah State and UTSA, for those 5 games to only allow 3 sacks, like that's a really big deal. So shout out to their offensive line on that. So talking about their offense, I'm just going to give you three players to know. I'm sure as college football fans, a lot of you will know these names. But number 10, quarterback Marcel Reed, a dynamic dual threat player. And then I mentioned those two receivers. Number 1, wide receiver Mario Craver, and then number 7, wide receiver Casey Concepcion. So that's a lot about their offense. They're very dynamic, but they do a great job to, in my opinion, of balancing their offense. So between the pass and the run, and they have a quarterback that could do that as well. And then on the defensive side of the football, a name to note instantly, number 9, defensive end, Cassius Howell. Currently leads the SEC in sacks right now. He has 8 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. This is a probably potential first-round pick out of Texas A&M. They lost a lot of guys on this defensive line last year. If you remember, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, 2 Shamars. But they lost several different players on this defensive line. And to have Cassius Howell, who is a transfer from Bowling Green in his second year here now at Texas A&M, to have him break out like he has with 8 sacks, like he's going to be somebody we're really going to have to watch for. And those offensive tackles are going to really have to know where he is and maybe put a second guy on him in obvious pass rush snaps. Another stat: 103 rush yards per game allowed by the Texas A&M defense, and 67.7 in the last 3 games. So I say that to say, usually, and you've known this with Arkansas because we've played Alabama, A&M, and Arkansas State. Usually, you're in a spot where those early games are really kind of upping your numbers, so they're making your offense look better, your defense look better. Not the case here, actually. So 103 rush yards per game, but actually 68 essentially in the last 3 games. Well, those last 3 games are all SEC opponents. That's Auburn, that's Mississippi State, that's Florida. So in the 3 more difficult games, obviously Notre Dame's probably their toughest game they've played this year. But in these 3 games, these last 3 weeks, they've been able to hold their opponents to 68 rushing yards per game. That's crazy. So And then also in that same time, 12 points per game allowed on the defensive side of the football. So this is a defense that I wouldn't say struggled in their first 3 games, but they played Notre Dame and gave up, I believe, 40 points in that game. Yeah. And these last 3 games, 12 points per game allowed. That includes a 10-point defensive stop against Auburn, 9 points Mississippi State, and then 17 was their most in the last 3 weeks, and that was against Florida. So I mentioned players to know on the offensive side. We look at the defensive side. Cassius Howell, number 9. Number 21, linebacker Tarian York. This is their leading tackler, and a guy that had an impressive season last year as well. And then number 4, one of the better defensive backs in the SEC, Will Lee the third. So those are 3 names to watch for them on the defensive side of the football. Now let's talk about where I think we can win and where I think we can struggle. So when we start off with wins, Texas A&M is a defense that's as good and as prominent as I've shown them to be these last 3 weeks. They've only actually allowed 2 interceptions. So they've only picked off the opposing quarterback twice. Arkansas is in a spot where in our 6 games, we've only thrown 5 interceptions. So Green throws a little less than 1 per game, and they've only averaged about 1 every 3 games. So this is in a spot where they do a really good job of stopping the run and the pass, but from the passing perspective, they kind of pick and choose their battles, and a lot of interceptions is not something they do. They're willing to give up passes and completions here and there, and play a little more safe in the secondary side of things in that pass defense. So this is a spot where I don't necessarily think Taylor Green's going to have like a 400 passing yard game or something, but I think he's in a spot where he has the opportunity to be very safe, and I think allow himself to make a few plays here and there, but like be very conservative with the football and not necessarily get it in harm's way. Another spot where I think we can win, Texas A&M is 38.3% on third down conversions. So if just for reference, Arkansas, one of the better teams in the SEC, 57%, so that's about 20% less. And we give up 44% on third down, so a little more than Texas A&M converts. But I will say in this Tennessee game, under the new tutelage of Bobby Petrino, 22% on third down. So Tennessee converted 2 out of their 9 third down conversions, or their third down attempts. So yes, 44% on the season. That also includes that 22%. So we would have been probably closer to 50 going into that Tennessee game. But 22% against Tennessee, that's a big deal against one of the more potent offenses in the entire country. So I don't necessarily think that we're going to keep maybe A&M at 22%, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're at 38 somewhere, and they're in that 30% range. I really think our defense can show up on third downs this week. 2 spots, though, I think we can struggle. Right now, we have 11 sacks and 6 turnovers forced this season. I don't believe any of those are fumbles. I think they're all interceptions. I could be totally wrong, though. Let me make sure. Um, but yes, 11 sacks, so nothing too impressive on that front. 4 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles. So that's how it's made up. But 11 sacks, 6 turnovers forced. Texas A&M, like I mentioned earlier, only 7 sacks allowed, and they fumbled the ball 0 times. So I say this stat to say we struggle with getting after the quarterback outside of Quincy Rhodes, and we struggle forcing turnovers. Well, Texas A&M doesn't give up sacks, and they don't fumble the football. So that's a spot where their strength meets our weakness, and I really hope that we can maybe get after the passer here. I think being in a home environment, that's going to help a lot, and force turnovers. I mean, I preached this going into the Tennessee game, and we just talked about it now after the aftermath of that game. We got to force turnovers and we got to create sacks if we want opportunities to win these football games against really good football teams. Let's take a stat to know we allow 435 yards per game, 523 in our last 4. So if you exclude essentially the Alabama A&M and the Arkansas State, our 4 real games this season, we've actually allowed 523 yards per game. Well, Texas A&M, a team I mentioned, is really balanced. They average 459 yards per game, and then in their last 4, so Notre Dame, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Florida. So their 4 real games of the season as well. They've also averaged 164 more yards than their opposing offense. So what does that mean? Like A&M, let's say they have 400 offensive yards. Well, their average opponent is having 236 yards. So they have a significant gap on their opponent in terms of offensive yards to have 459, and then essentially we're at a spot where we'd be at about a little under 300. Like they really do create a big gap with a potent offense and a strong defense. So we're in a spot where we did a better job. I think we actually out yardaged Tennessee. I think it was really close. I think it was literally like by maybe 10 yards, 496 to 485, so 11 yards. But we're in a spot if we can keep balance with Texas A&M, I think we have a real shot. So it shows you to have a 164-yard average difference between A&M's offense and whoever they've played. If we can hold pace with them, maybe we have a shot of winning this football game. And then I mentioned I've got 3 stats that I want to make known. 2 of them are about A&M, one of them is about us. They're really all to our benefit. This first one's not, but Texas A&M averages for quarterbacks. So right, Taylor Green is a offensive threat both with his arm and with his legs. Texas A&M against opposing quarterbacks, their rush yards allowed, right? Negative 11.8 rush yards allowed. Now in college football, if you take a sack, unlike the NFL, it counts against your rushing yard. They don't have it against like a sack number. It's just it'll subtract from your rushing yard. So when Taylor Green takes a 10-yard sack, he loses 10 yards from his rushing yards. But still, and they do convert sacks, but it's not enough to really create this crazy number like we're seeing here. But essentially, they give up negative 12 rush yards to their opposing quarterbacks. Jackson Arnold's the only one to actually have a positive game, the Auburn quarterback, and he had 11. So it's not like they haven't played dynamic quarterbacks. Blake Shapen, he's not great, but he does have that dynamic ability. DJ Lagway is a guy that I feel like that's one of the things he's known for. And then CJ Carr, who definitely looked like a dual threat quarterback against us. To hold all 3 of those guys, and even Jackson Arnold, who's dual threat to 11 yards, like we're in a spot. Taylor Green's going to severely weigh this number out. Like even if he has a bad game, he'll still have like 30 yards. But just to show kind of how well they do against containing mobile quarterbacks. Then Texas A&M kicker Randy Bond. Not to take a shot at him, but he is last in the SEC in field goal percentage with 61.5%. And in fact, he actually has the worst field goal percentage in all of FBS among kickers with 10 plus attempts. So why do I add that caveat? Essentially, they're letting him kick and he's still missing. So amongst kickers that have more than 10 attempts, so they've played 6 games. I think he has 13 or 14. I think it's 13. So they're giving him about 2 attempts a game, and he's really only making about one of those. 61.5%, barely over 50%, and he really does actually have the worst field goal percentage amongst kickers with those more than 10 attempts. And then the last stat to know, this one to me I thought was really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people that have watched the broadcast recently have seen numbers like this, but Arkansas is the only FBS team. Oh, these are 2 positive stats, actually. I got 2 more. Arkansas is the only FBS team right now in the country with 2 500-plus yard rushers. So that's Taylor Green and that's Mike Washington Jr. And then Taylor Green specifically, this is the stat that's been all over broadcast. Taylor Green leads the FBS in quarterback rush yards. This doesn't include 2 players, so another caveat kind of to the stat as well. But the Air Force quarterback and the Navy quarterback, Blake Horvath, service academies, they have the tendency to triple option and run the football more than a lot of other teams do. And so I disincluded those 2. But outside of those 2 players, Taylor Green, amongst all quarterbacks in the FBS, leads the country in rushing yards. So those are my 3/4 stats to watch and to know going into this A&M Arkansas game. But I like to give 2 hogs to watch as well. We're going to kind of run through these because we've broken down both sides of the football. But on the offensive side, Raylan Sharp, I mentioned 4 different players had 3+ catches. I looked kind of back at A&M's previous games and kind of who's, I would say, played well as receivers in these games that they've played against. It seems like it's a shifty, smaller receiver. And for him to have a big game against Tennessee, I like him to also have a big game upcoming against Texas A&M and really spread the football offensively. I expect another pretty balanced game like we did against Tennessee. I expect that against Texas A&M as well. On the defensive side of the football, Cam Ball, I was struggling deciding who I wanted to put here after reading that stat about how well Walker did against Brazzell. For Brazzell to only have 1 catch, 5 yards, I kind of maybe should have put Kenai Walker here. But I struggled with putting a defensive back player because I think their A&M is going to look good from a passing perspective, and it's hard to pinpoint that one guy. I don't love what we've done in the linebacker room this year, but maybe I thought about putting Xavier Sori. But ultimately, this is a dynamic running team. They have 2 300+ yard rushers, and Marcel Reed is also a dynamic runner. So I wanted to put Cam Ball on here. I think he's a guy that he's one of the more veteran players on this defense. He's a team captain, and I expect him to really get up for this game. And I hope that he's in a spot where he realizes like what he's going to have to do as a player and how poorly we played from a run defensive perspective this past week against Tennessee. And I'm sure Petrino and the defensive coordinator are really looking at it like this week, where can we improve? And I'm sure sacks and turnovers are a big thing. But another spot I'm sure they're looking at is, hey, we gave up 140 plus rushing yards to this Bishop guy and over 200 something rushing yards to this Tennessee offense. And this was something we were better at than our past defense. What happened here? And can we improve on that going into this Texas A&M game? So Cam Ball is the guy that I have as the defensive player to watch. So each week, I make my prediction. I told you my prediction last week was 31-41. Tennessee wins. I was very close, and Tennessee ultimately did win. This week, right now, the spread as of Monday, 5:07 p.m., is 7.5 in favor of Texas A&M. The over/under right now is 62.5. If I was just giving my predictions, just this kind of is a little bit of a tease, but I think we cover. I think we cover the 7.5. I think this is an under game. I just mentioned how great Texas A&M's defense is. Ours is not great, but it's at home. The environment, I think, is going to be crazy. We didn't win against Tennessee, but I still think there's some positive direction for Arkansas fans after that Tennessee game, looking like, okay, hey, maybe we can hang with this Texas A&M team at home. But ultimately, if I'm picking the actual game here, right? I so far this season I've stayed pretty consistent to what I picked prior to the season. Those included the first 2 games. Ole Miss, I decided to make a switch. I had us losing. Then I was like, "Oh, we're gonna win." We didn't. Then Memphis, I said we'd win. I picked us to win. We didn't. Notre Dame, I didn't think we'd win. And Tennessee, I didn't think we'd win. And I predicted those things. This week, I'm going in a spot where at the beginning of this year, I picked us to beat Texas A&M. I didn't think Texas A&M would be the number 4 team in the country. I don't think a lot of people did. But in this spot, I think that after what I've seen this past week, I'm picking us to win 27-24 at home this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. I think we beat the Texas A&M Aggies, and I really do think we shocked the world here. Texas A&M is probably the front runner in the SEC right now. Them, Ole Miss, and Alabama are all undefeated in the SEC. Texas A&M is the highest ranked SEC team in the country, and I think we beat them. Here's a couple reasons why. Bobby Petrino, OC for Texas A&M in 2023. Is he in a spot where he wants some revenge? Obviously, that coaching staff, it's not Jimbo Fisher anymore. It's Mike Elko. But, he used to coach for them. Is there some added juice there for him now as the head coach? Texas A&M faces number 10 LSU on the road next week. It's just a look-ahead game for them. This is a trap game. This is a spot where we can get them when they're not looking. Third thing, this is the first time we have played this game in Fayetteville, Arkansas, in the state of Arkansas for that matter, since 2013. We don't have a good record against A&M. We have won 1 game since 2011, and that was 2021. That was the one game that's the one time I've been in person for a Texas A&M game. We won. I'll be in person for this one too. But this is the first time this game has been in Fayetteville since 2013. I don't know if there's like some added juice there, but I feel like this is a spot where it's like, we haven't had this game in so long. Let's get up for it. And it's not a night game like the Tennessee game was, but it is an afternoon game. And I think there will still be some juice there. And then in reference to the Tennessee game last season, just like this season, this is our first SEC game in Fayetteville, just like last year. We played the 4th team in the country, Tennessee. This year it's A&M. And we won. We beat Tennessee last year, right? I think this is a spot we could do the same. It's the first SEC home game. We're in Fayetteville. We're playing Texas A&M. They're the 4th team in the country. I think even with Tennessee, both teams feel a little overrated. Like I think Texas A&M is a good football team, but are they 4 in the country good? Like I think they can make the playoff, but is this a team that's going to be like the 10 seed when we look back now? That was the case with Tennessee. I thought Tennessee was a little overrated. I didn't necessarily think we were going to win that game going into it, but this is a spot where I think we could do it. I really do. I really genuinely believe. I'm not just saying this, I think, as a homer. I genuinely believe. I picked this at the beginning of the year. I'm trying to stay consistent in that, but at the same time, I do have belief that we can win this football game. So I'm predicting it. Arkansas at home, 4th team in the country, Texas A&M gets beat 27-24. The Hogs reign victorious and then move to 3-4.